So I'll talk you through the spread that I have for us for Halloween, and then we'll do the cards, and then I will do a summary, and I'll also put a summary in my circle on Insight Timer, which you can find by going to the Circles tab and searching for Keziah's Circle. Okay, so for the Halloween theme, we've got 6 cards this week, so we're getting more and more cards as the weeks go on, and I can sit for longer and longer. And so there are 2 pairs and then another couple of cards in between. So firstly, for the Halloween theme, we've got Trick and Treat. I don't know if you can see my board fully behind me there. So Trick and Treat. So of course, tricks are the things that might not be so nice or might just not be as expected, might be a bit tricky this week. And treat are the things that might be really, really nice this week. So we've got trick and treat. Most weeks involve a bit of both. And then at the top here, we've got ancestors. So the ancestors are really important to this reading, to this time of year. And with the ancestors, we all have different relationships with our ancestors. And let's invite in for this reading those ancestors who are benign, who we are able to work with in a way that is that works for everyone. And there are 2 positions for the ancestors, because in any relationship you have different ways in which we relate. So, you know, in relationship with the ancestors, there are things that you can do for them to honor them. And so that might be in the form of how you communicate with them, how you build your relationship with them, might just be about how you carry yourself, how you live your values, how you live their values, how do you honor them in your everyday life. It might be about doing some little ritual like lighting a candle for them, tending graves or spaces. All of these are ways to honor your ancestors. And you can also ask ancestors for support. So sometimes we can do that, can't we? So there are 2 positions for the ancestors, and one is about how can we best honor them, and the other is about what can we ask of them, or what might they be willing to gift to us. And ancestors can mean lots of different things. I tend to split it into 3 different ways, categories that are not complete. So ancestors of blood, ancestors of spirit, and ancestors of place. And ancestors of blood tend to be your family. Don't necessarily have to be blood family. I have been thinking a lot about this theme, you know, who gets to claim ancestorhood or descendancy, and does it have, you know, does it have to be a blood relation? Is it enough that they have that you have a relationship with them of an ancestral kind? So ancestors of family, shall we say, ancestors of spirit, who are those ancestors who walked before us on our own paths, whether that's our spiritual path, it might be our profession. So, you know, if I'm a Reiki master, so for me, everyone who has practiced Reiki before are my ancestors of spirit. If you're a teacher, all the other teachers who went before, or a doctor, all the other doctors that went before, or whatever that is, they would be your ancestors of spirit. And then ancestors of place. And for me, this means the people who were in the place where you are before you were there. So for some of you, that might be ancestors, also sort of ancestors of family or ancestors of spirit, or it might be a different group. I'm an immigrant here where I live, and the people who lived on this land before were not related to me, not for a few generations anyway. We're all related if we go far enough back, but I do build a strong connection with them, and I do my best to honor them, because I feel that's part of what it is for me, as an immigrant to be in this land, to be connected with this land. So ancestors are place of the people who went before in the place. So those are just examples really for you of the kinds of ancestors that you might want to call into this reading. So we have trick or treat, we've got honouring and gifts from the ancestors, and then we've got two other sort of Halloween themes. So this one here is going to be tradition. So there are lots of different traditions around this time of year. Halloween itself is a tradition. Samhain is a tradition that precedes it. For some people, All Souls Day, Day of the Dead. There are many different traditions across the world around this time of year, which might, all they are really are ways of passing on something which is meaningful to a community. And so the position here in this spread of tradition is about what is meaningful to us as a community of beings. Where does that come from, and how do we pass that on? And then we have here disguise. So lots of people like to dress up this time of year, and there is a tradition that that where this came from was about a death goddess moving through claiming souls, and that if you disguised yourself well enough, she would not recognize you and she would pass on and leave you alone. So that's one tradition from this time of year that this disguise could be from. In other ways, sometimes it's just that dressing up is fun. Certainly, you know, for the little kids, that's very much what it's about, playing make-believe, using the imagination, engaging the imagination. And that doesn't have to be, of course, just for little kids. We can engage in play and imagination as well. So there are all those things there in that position of disguise. So those are our 6 positions for this week's reading. So I invite you all to take a deep breath. And if there is something specific that you have been seeking guidance on, you might bring that to mind. Otherwise, just intend that you receive what you need, and I intend that each person here receives what they need. And let's just take a minute to connect to those ancestors that we would like to work with, whether those are ancestors of family, ancestors of spirit, ancestors of place, or some other kind of ancestor. Okay. So we'll start with these bottom 2, trick and treat. So what tricks might we be finding ourselves coming into contact with this week? And the card that comes up is the 2 of Pentacles. I'm using the Druid Craft Tarot this week. So the 2 of Pentacles is, I often see this as about trying to keep up with more than we can manage at one time. When my child was very little, I pulled this card a lot because I was juggling all these different responsibilities that I had to take responsibility for, and you know, all my effort and focus came on keeping these pentacles in the air. And so in the position of trick, that is how I would read this card about, you know, what we may get tripped up by this week is that we're not just asked to put our focus in one place, in one area, that actually there may be more than one thing which demands attention, needs energy. So that is the trick this week. And of course, the trick to that trick is that we can, Annie, you take other people's problems as your own. So recognizing that, reevaluating, do I really need to keep all these pentacles up in the air? And then once you know that the pentacles that you're juggling are the pentacles that are meaningful to you, actually just allowing yourself to go into the flow of it. Because when you are juggling, so I'm told, it's not a skill I've mastered myself, but any kind of movement like that, you can do it sort of frantically in a kind of, oh, I've got to do this, or you can do it in a, I'm actually really enjoying the skill involved in this, and I'm really getting into this moment and enjoying the flow. And that is the trick to handling our trick this week. So I'll just put that there. And so what treats might we be able to look forward to this week? And the card that we have here is, oh, this is interesting, Justice. So it's a major arcana card, something to pay attention to, a major energy. And justice is about fairness, first and foremost. So that sort of literal meaning of justice, the right thing happening. Fairness, it might be about readdressing a balance. So we've got sort of, we might get caught off balance if we're not focusing well this week, but we can also redress balance. We can rebalance ourselves. And actually, this is a really, really powerful archetype. So it invites us to check in with, align with, and realign with our values. So what's really important to us, and checking that we're in alignment with that. And when we do that, of course it's a treat. Of course it becomes very, very pleasurable, because we are then in a state where what we're doing has meaning for us. So we can take pleasure in aligning with our values this week. And this may be as well about appealing to justice in some way. So it may be that if you are seeking some kind of justice, and that can be legal, but by no means is it limited to legal justice, then that might come nicely for you this week. So that's our treat. Ancestors then. What messages to and from the ancestors? So firstly, how can we choose this week to honour the ancestors? Oh, and this is interesting. So what we have here is the Nine of Swords. So sometimes the Nine of Swords can indicate anxiety or insomnia. You see, this is someone sort of sitting up in bed at night. So the kinds of things that might keep you up at night, those are the things that come in the dark. And in this Druid Craft card, the person, they're sitting there, they've got their hands over their face, but they actually look to me, if you look really carefully, I don't know if you can see that there, like they're kind of peeking out from it. So they're having a very visible anxiety or discomfort reaction, but they're also they're peeking out. It's a show in some way. And the other thing that can happen, Natasha, yes, I've had this card come up for me when I've had migraines as well. The other thing that this card can represent is grief. So in terms of honouring our ancestors, it may be that, now is a really good time to acknowledge those ancestors who we have known and lost and grieved for, whether that's recent, more recent, or further away, more distant in the timeline of our lives, that we can have space for grief and to acknowledge that, these ancestors that were close to us and are now no longer with us, we miss them. And so that process of allowing these feelings of loss, of sadness and grief is a gift to ourselves, because it allows us to hold space for those emotions that we very, very often don't want to hold space for. We want to pretend they're not there. We want to push them away. And it's also a gift. This is one of the ways that we can honor the ancestors, by acknowledging how important they were to us. So that goes there. And then a gift or message from the ancestors this week. And we have the Prince of Cups. So I also see this as someone who's sort of feeling their emotions, and they look like they're toasting someone, and like reading really, really strongly. First, what strikes me is reading it together with that card. So, you know, when we have someone that we miss, that we're grieving for, it's almost like this is a message saying, message back, sort of saluting us and saying, yeah, we miss you too. So that's it's a reciprocality of this very strong connection with those who we might mourn for, with those who we might miss. And then the gift and the message from the ancestors is really sort of keep on keeping on. This Prince of Cups I often see as someone who's a survivor, especially in this deck. So if you can see, his clothes are a little bit ragged. He looks like he's been through the wars a bit, maybe. So I see him as being in this moment where what he's had to go through has passed, and there have been losses along the way, and those losses are shaping losses. And yet he's now at this moment where he can pause beside the water, and of course the water is his element, and it's the element of the heart, of the emotions, of the cups. And just hold up that cup and make a toast and do honour and acknowledgement. And so this is an acknowledgement in this position of all that you may have been through, that may have shaped you, that may have been hard, that there may have been losses along the way. And yet it's okay now to pause and take a deep breath and acknowledge all that has been, and also acknowledge that you are safe now, because this is a character who's been through the wars. This is a character who maybe has some stuff to process, but this is not a character who is in danger. This is a character who is pausing beside the water, which is their own element. So there's also this message, really strong message, that you are safe now and you are safe to process. So really, they're not very light cards, these two cards that have come in the positions to do with the ancestors, but they are really an invitation to go deep, to acknowledge grief and loss, and also to remember, you know, you are safe now, and that it's okay to process this now. And the other thing, of course, about the Prince of Cups, the princes in other decks are also knights, and knights are on a quest. So the Prince of Cups is on a quest for something of the heart. And so there's an invitation to remember what that quest is for you as well there. Okay, so the other two positions in the reading, we have tradition, and the card for tradition is Four of Pentacles. This is interesting. So the Four of Pentacles, in this position, I will read it as being a kind of, there's a lockedness, there's a structure in this card. So there's sort of solid, yeah, it's a very solid card and the structure in it. So in this position of tradition, It's a reminder that the traditions that we hold for whatever reason, like sometimes we want to really, really stick rigidly to traditions, to the word, and sometimes we really want to diverge from them. And I'm not talking about sort of, well, yeah, maybe even to go against them completely or go in a different way about them. But this is an invitation to use the structure of tradition. So where traditions, particularly traditions, ancestral traditions, actually have taken shape, and they have a structure. There is a reason for that structure. And one of the things that has come up, I've just been teaching a Reiki Master course, and one of the things that has come up in that is that, you know, in this particular tradition, there are certain ways of doing things, and once you have mastered them, then you can start to sort of riff on it, if you like, because you understand the tradition. I've heard that from artists, you know, who will study specific techniques and ways, and when they're really good at that, that's when they start to do their really creative, their kind of own work. So there's something in here about honouring tradition in a way, understanding the structures. So whether you stay within the structure of traditions that have been passed down to you, sort of ancestrally, societally, whatever, or whether you choose to move outside of them, understand why they are how they are. That's how I'm reading that today. And then disguise. So disguise, changing our appearance, changing our presentation. This might be as a way of keeping safe. It might just be fun, might just be dressing up. Let's see what this card is. Oh, look, we've got the King of Cups. So we've got the Prince of Cups up here, and then we've got the King of Cups here. And so the King of Cups is someone who is not in disguise at all, actually. This is someone who I would normally describe as being so in touch with their emotions that they can express them in a certain way. And so it's really interesting that this King of Cups comes up in this position of disguise. And I'm wondering how exactly to interpret that. And we have here, it's a very different card from this tradition Four of Pentacles card that was there. So I wonder if there's maybe, I know what it is. So often in traditions, in where we get to dress up, that often going back a long time, not one from this time of year, but a bit later in the year, you've got like Saturnalia. Often these times are times where the structures, the boundaries of society are broken. So when we all do that dressing up, going in disguise, we're kind of breaking outside of the roles that we traditionally play in our societies, in our functions, in our roles in society. That's what this is about. So this Four of Pentacles and King of Cups together is a reminder that when we have these sort of dressing up traditions, when we have these traditions where we can go outside of our normal roles, where we are, that actually gives us the freedom to express. And so I'm thinking of Lynn, as you say, like the Day of the Dead celebrations, dressing up for Halloween, putting on ritual clothing to celebrate Samhain, whatever it is, this kind of the way that we present ourselves changing gives us the opportunity to change our role, and this is going to give us a chance to express our emotions. So it's been the way these festivals work has been described as a way to reinforce why the structures that are around in society are needed. And, you know, different people have different opinions on which structures are needed and whether they're needed at all. but this is one of the theories of how these festivals work. But in terms of how we use these festivals on an individual level, we can get very expressive. So I don't know if you've ever seen drama therapy, where people will go into different roles as a form of therapy, and that helps them to sometimes to acknowledge emotions and sometimes to express emotions that they already know about. So I think that's what this is about here, these two together actually, but certainly this King of Cups here is about maybe we have an opportunity this week to step outside of our normal roles in a way that lets us get in touch with parts of ourselves, and particularly emotional parts of ourselves, which need to be expressed in a healthy way. And this playfulness of disguise is a fun and healthy way to be able to express those emotions. I think that's what this King of Cups is telling us. Notice as well, we do have the Prince and the King of Cups there. So we have an invitation to, well, I think this, it's an invitation again coming from gifts that the ancestors have given us or left for us. So that's the reading for this week. I will post a summary in my circle. It's called Keziah's Circle on Insight Timer. And I shall summarize again just in a moment. Although I must admit, there are so many threads to that reading. I don't know exactly how I'm going to summarize it yet, but I know the right words will come through. Just an opportunity to remind you that my The Magician Manifesting with Tarot workshop, live Zoom workshop, is on at the end of November. You'll find the link to that in my profile on the mentoring tab on Insight Timer. And that is the first module of, I've been teaching a 52-week course called The Magician. I've been teaching that for the last couple of years, of going really deep with the tarot. And what I'm now doing is I've broken that up into 13 modules. And the first module of that is this Manifesting with Tarot 3-hour workshop at the end of November. And it is all about how we manifest, how we create our reality through tarot. So you'll find all the info there on my profile page. Thank you to those of you who are donating. I really appreciate that. These live sessions are free. They're available to everyone, as it should be, and your donations help to make that happen, help to make it continue to happen. So much gratitude. I appreciate that. Sharon, you're asking what's my profile page. If you tap on my photo in the right-hand corner of your screen, you'll get to my profile. You'll find all the information there. And of course, Keziah's Circle on Insight Timer will also have all the information. So to summarize this reading, right, where do I start with this? We had so much come through. Tricks and treats. Tricks, we could trip over this week if we try to take on too much, or if we find that our attention is being pulled in more than one direction at once. And the trick to sorting that out is to get yourself into the flow of it. Find where you're really skilled at it and enjoy that. The treat this week, this is the only major arcana card in the reading, is Justice. So something, if there's been something unfair, it might just slip back into fairness this week. There's something like that going on in that energy. We had a really powerful message from the ancestors. We had the Nine of Swords in the position of how we can honour the ancestors, and the Prince of Cups in the position of a message from the ancestors. And together what that was is this Nine of Swords, I think, was telling us that, if we have grief, if we have people that we miss, to hold space for those emotions and to let them be, and to acknowledge that we miss people. And then we had this wonderful message, the Prince of Cups, which there was so many different messages in that, but one was that you're safe, that it's safe to process all of this now. And another was that the heart quest can go on. And so there may be some processing to do. There may be grief around. You know, when we think of ancestors, whether it's people that we miss, that we're grieving for, whether it's ancestors who left us a legacy that is challenging, because some people do have that challenges in how their ancestors were in the world as well, or how their ancestors were treated as well. Hold space for that, but that at this moment you are safe, and that's why it's okay to process your emotions. And then we have the Four of Pentacles in tradition, which is about how the traditions that are passed down to us and that we choose to pass down, because traditions are not just things that come to us, they're also things that we pass on. I don't know about anyone else, but one Halloween tradition that I have already passed on to the next generation. And for me, I've taken my child trick-or-treating in the past. We dress up, we go around knocking on doors asking for sweets. There's only certain times of the year you can do that and get away with it. But what that means is, what that reminder is that we pass on traditions as well as receive them. So, and the Four of Pentacles in this position was about the structure of those traditions. So whether we follow traditions to the letter, whether we go wildly away from them, understanding the structure of the tradition can be really, really useful in knowing when and how it's appropriate to do that. And then the King of Cups here in disguise, an invitation to step outside of our normal roles, because what this might give us is a chance to do some balancing and expressing. I keep talking about expressing, but it's also balancing of emotions, centering. And the King of Cups is very centered, very balanced. So it's not that the King of Cups doesn't have wobbly emotions sometimes, but that the King of Cups knows how to come back into balance even when those emotions are there. So that we can access that King of Cups this week, perhaps by stepping into slightly different roles, perhaps by play. I think there is a playful invitation there, an element of invitation to playfulness.